Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we are going to take a look how we can run a flow with some other user permissions. So when I say some other user permissions, probably if I'm a user who is not having access to the flow connections, for example, if I'm working with SharePoint list and if a person who is running the flow is not having access to SharePoint list, then she or he should able to run that flow with owner's right. So when I say owner right, so it's kind of like same as we used to have in classic SharePoint, run with elevated privileges. So we are running our flow with some other users permissions, but would not be giving the access to the flow in turn. So that we are going to see. So I have just logged into my flow and you can see like I am on that my flow section. So one thing which has to be remembered is like run with other user permissions. This feature has been recently introduced and is only given to the manual triggered flow as of now. So when I say manual triggered flow, that means like instant cloud flow but having the manual triggers. So for example, this, if you can see on my screen, that there are few triggers which can be run as manually. For example, manual trigger flow, and then for selected message, for a selected file in OneDrive, for a selected file in SharePoint, for a selected item in SharePoint, and selected row in Excel. So all these manual flow, and as well as Power Apps V2. So in Power Apps earlier version, like it was not there, which can be the flow can be done with some other user permissions or credentials. So these are few triggers which can be used when we want to run the flow with some other user permissions or with some other users credentials, I would say. So let's just pick any of one of it so that I can show you. So I'll just pick for selected item in SharePoint and create this flow. And for now, I'll just connect that with one of my test site. Let me just pick this tab and any of this list, let's say event inventory, and in the next step I'll just want to have some sample action, let's say send email, and I'll just configure with the sample data and test subject and test body. So once I save it, so until unless you save the flow, you were not able to see that option of run with users, run only users. So you can see I am on the detail screen of my flow, and on the right hand side you can see we have these connections, what connections being used in flow, owners, who is the owner of this flow, and who actually like added and modify and delete the flow. So owners is that person. And if I just scroll down, like you can see process inside preview. So it's a new feature, it's a new thing which is being rolled out, that you can improve your flow by looking at the process insights, like how much time each step is taking. So I'll just create one separate video for this entire piece, but for now we can skip it. And lastly, we have run only users. So what that means is with which credentials this flow should be running. So let's say I am a XYZ user, but I am not having any access on my SharePoint list. I just want to trigger this flow, but the action should be happening with some other person's credentials. So I can have those people registered over here. For example, this person, let's say my colleague Prakash, wants to run this flow, and so I have just invited that user to this run only permissions, and in connections used, so you must have seen that your flow must be having connections, and sometimes it happens like the connections are of multiple users. So you can pick the connection used while running this flow. So if you just let it provided by a run only user, that means like the person who is running it would be running this with own credential. But if I just choose this run this connection with Krishan Sharma connection, then it will start using my connection rather than like the person who is running the flow. So I have just invited one of my colleague to run this flow with my connection. So probably this person is not having access to SharePoint list, which the flow is using, but he or she should able to create the item or work with the list with my connection. So that's how it works actually. So if I just save it, so I would able to see that this person is being added to run only users. So if I again added this and scroll up, you can see like it's not just one user we can add groups as well. So whatever groups this thing your AD has, like you can use those groups, Office 365 groups, to provide the credentials directly. For example, the people which are there in BDAV would be running this flow with my connection. So once I save it, so this is the actual run with elevated piece, I would say. And if I would like to again add this so that I can show you one of the things. So if I just selected user and group, but if I select SharePoint, what it does, it invites a SharePoint list or library. So for example, this site, because this is the site which is being used in my flows context, so it gives this as a drop down. And when I add this site, so what that means, like whatever users having access to this list would be added, would be allowed to use my connection. So once I just choose my connection and save it, would be allowed to use my connection to do any operations on this flow. I hope you got the point. And I can also like show you that owners thing. So if I added this owners, you can see you must be familiar with the screen. So I can invite any user or group over here. But if I just go to SharePoint tab, you can see add a SharePoint list as owner and add. So what that means is like whatever person having access to this particular DAV inventory list will be the owner of this flow and will be allowed to manage the flow. And when I say manage the flow, that means like modify the flow, delete the flow and update the flow. So this is how it works. Run only users, and these users would be using my connection instead of their own to work with the flow. So as I said, like there are limited set of manual triggers as of now for this particular run with elevated privilege, but I am hoping like it will come for the other triggers as well. For example, when item is created, when some other triggers is happening. So I would just like to show you one more piece, because this is the very much useful scenario where you are making one Power Apps, and that Power Apps in turn should be calling a flow, and that flow should be allowed to do operations on list or whatever this data source you are picking there. So you have to have this run only users set up for that particular flow. So if you are aware, so whenever we are creating Power Apps, we can just add a flow. So let me just quickly show you that piece as well, so that there should not be any confusion. So let me just open one of my app that is already there. I'll just added this. And I'll just add one flow in this app. And that flow should be running with the Power Apps version 2 to have that run with elevated privileges or run with only users feature. So I'll just go to this actions and we'll click on Power Automate and create a new flow. So it will give me a pop-up to create a flow, and you can just pick up any of this connection, but I'll just pick up this Power Apps button and have this as an additional step. So let's say I'll just simply choose mail, not going for a complex piece, just picking up this test and test. I just save and go back to my flow details page. Just show you that with Power Apps we can also have this run with, so there is no run only users And the reason is because I'm using a Power Apps trigger as an old one. It's not the Power Apps version 2, so I'll just delete it and have Power Apps. And when I see it, the triggers, I'll choose the Power Apps v2, and this, when I save this v2 version, go back to my flow details page, I will start seeing this run only users. So just remember, when you are working with Power Apps and you want to have one embedded flow, and just remember to use the Power App v2 version so that you can have the run only users, which can allow you to run the flow with other user permissions or with other user owners connections. So that's the key. So probably with this video, I think your concept about run only users should be clear, and you should be able to run your flows with the owner's connection and have it go. So that's it for today. If you have any questions, feel free to comment and I'll try to reply as much as I can. And if you like the video, please do subscribe to my channel, and thanks for today.